In the dead of winter between 1927 and 1928, the federal government launched a massive, coordinated raid on a crumbling Massachusetts seaport. Agents swarmed the docks, arresting half the town's population, while offshore, a Navy submarine fired torpedoes into the freezing Atlantic. Curious. Slightly hushed. This dramatic Prohibition-era bust is the fictional backdrop of H.P. Lovecraft's horror novella, The Shadow over Innsmouth. Beneath the surface plot of fishmen worshipping ancient gods lies a highly neurotic, hyper-paranoid diary of 1920s America. The United States during that decade struggled with three distinct panics: lawlessness, extreme rural isolation, and new scientific theories about human origins. To understand why aquatic monsters terrified audiences back then, we will investigate this fictional town as a crime scene of actual American cultural anxieties. Lovecraft isolates Innsmouth by design. He places it in a decaying, post-industrial stretch of Massachusetts, cut off and surrounded by abandoned, weather-worn houses. The locals spend their days consuming massive quantities of bootleg liquor. In the 1920s, Prohibition had driven alcohol production underground, turning everyday citizens into criminals and empowering federal agents to raid large stashes of seized barrels and glass jugs. For the urban elite, these remote, law-breaking communities were a source of deep anxiety. Sociologists at the time even studied tri-racial isolates, secluded backwaters that wealthy city dwellers viewed as breeding grounds for moral and physical decay. The bootlegging in the novella represents an isolated community that has violently rejected the laws and norms of civilized society. Innsmouth's rotting infrastructure is a sociological reflection of a rapidly urbanizing nation. America was moving forward at an unprecedented pace, and it was terrified of the lawless, forgotten towns it was leaving behind. That fear of rural decay eventually takes a darker, physical form. The townspeople themselves are slowly transforming into aquatic, fish-like monsters known as the Deep Ones. In 1925, a courtroom in Tennessee hosted the Scopes monkey trial, where lawyers were publicly debating whether human evolution could be taught in schools. Darwinism was suddenly front-page news, forcing the public into a struggle with natural selection. This anxiety was amplified by fossil discoveries like the Piltdown man skull. At the time, it provided what seemed like hard, physical proof that humanity shared a direct ancestry with primitive beasts. This standard evolutionary tree plots an upward trajectory from primitive organisms to complex modern humans. But if biological progression is mechanical, it could theoretically run in reverse. Lovecraft weaponized this concept, devolution, imagining humanity regressing backward into a grotesque aquatic state. The Deep Ones are the physical embodiment of a society reacting to evolutionary science. They trigger the terrifying realization that humanity might not actually be the permanent, untouchable apex of creation on this planet. You can see this regression in what the locals call the Innsmouth look. Characters are born human, but as they age, they develop bulging, unblinking eyes, thick, scaly skin, and receding hairlines, all side effects of their ancestors mating with the Deep Ones. This fictional interbreeding tapped directly into the 1920s eugenics movement. Exhibits and lectures were held nationwide to promote an obsession with genetic purity, arguing human traits could be curated by controlling reproduction. The eugenics movement was driven by rampant xenophobia. White elites were consumed by a cultural terror of mongrelization, fearing the arrival of outsiders would taint New England's bloodlines. These domestic racial anxieties prompted drastic legislative action. In 1924, Congress passed a strict immigration act designed to stem the tide of foreign arrivals and restrict the ethnic makeup of the country. Lovecraft used monstrous biology to encode these racial anxieties. He masked a political, xenophobic fear of immigrants behind a cosmic fear of alien DNA infiltrating a small American town. After fleeing the town in sheer terror, the narrator returns home and begins researching his genealogy. He discovers that his great-grandmother was from Innsmouth, meaning he shares that same tainted bloodline. He realizes he isn't an outside observer reporting on a distant cult. The transformation has already started within him, and he is actively mutating into the very monster he spent the entire story running from. Instead of fighting it, the narrator ultimately surrenders to his fate. He chooses to embrace his alien heritage, planning his escape to dive down into the abyssal city at the bottom of the ocean. This ending subverts 1920s eugenicist logic. By revealing that even an educated, respectable New Englander could carry a hidden monstrous lineage, Lovecraft suggests the rigid racial boundaries his era tried to build were porous from the start. The shadow over Innsmouth endures because it captures the era's ultimate cosmic horror, the discovery that the perceived threat to civilization is written into our own DNA.